Hello, everyone. I am Dave Peaty. I am the current board president for Publishing Professionals Network, and I welcome you today. This is one of our regular series, professional development series that we try to do at noontime on the West Coast for free via Zoom. And this one today, I think, is really going to be really interesting, partly because there are a lot of people who actually are unclear on what hybrid publishing is. And I think it's clearly a super important thing to know, because I think it's going to be, it's for certain authors, I think it's really important, but I think for all of us in publishing, it's a path that we really need to be knowledgeable about. So, okay, so before I introduce our presenters today, I did want to talk a little bit about PPN. So Publishing Professionals Network, we're an all-volunteer nonprofit. We have been around for over 50 years now. We were originally known as Book Builders West. In 2012, we changed the name to Publishing Professionals Network. And I invite you to come check out our organization. Probably the easiest way is through the website. One of our board members will add it to the group chat, but it's pubpronetwork.org. The benefits of being a member is up there on one of the pages. But it's really about being here for community, to support each other, to make publishing a better place to work, and to support each other in that process. I'm not going to spend that much more time, but we do have a conference coming up in April. It's our annual conference. It's an in-person only conference. I believe it's the 25th. It's a Friday. Look for announcements for it, but the conference team is busily working on setting up the programs for that. If you want to be a part of that, you don't even have to be a member. You can reach out to us through the email on the site, and we will tell you how you can get involved. And you don't even have to be local to where the event will be, which is in Berkeley at the David Brower Center. Okay, enough about that. I'm going to go ahead and let Christopher Locke of IBPA, the Independent Book Publishers Association, introduce himself, and Johanna Vondeling, who is formerly of Barrett Kohler, which is where I got to know her first, and now has her own consulting firm. I will let her introduce herself as well, but I know both these folks, and I have to say I'm just really thrilled that they're willing to present here and talk about hybrid publishing today. So welcome. Okay, I'm going to try to do my tech thing here.
Well, hello, everyone. So I'm Christopher Locke. I'm the IBPA Director of Membership and Member Services. And Dave, we're grateful for you to have us here, and also for everything you do to help inform all the indie publishers and author publishers out there about all the different aspects of publishing. I'm honored to speak alongside Johanna, who's had quite an amazing career in publishing. IBPA, we're a trade association for independent publishers and author publishers, and our whole goal is to just try to help publishers succeed in publishing. As a lot of you all know, there are a lot of things that can be quite difficult to navigate. So we make that easier, and we have book marketing programs to help sell books, but we also have community. And you all know about that through here, because it's so important to just connect with other people doing what you're doing, to ask questions about how it's going. So thank you so much for coming today. And Johanna?
Thanks for that, Christopher. Hi, everyone. I'm Johanna Vondeling from Vondeling Ventures. I'm so happy to be here today. Really pleased to speak with you about, I'm going to be talking from the perspective of the authors and what the authors' experience of hybrid publishing is like. I myself have a consulting firm, and I work with authors to help them find a path to publishing, particularly in the nonfiction space. So one of the options that I've been sharing with authors is hybrid publishing, and I've learned a lot about what authors do and don't understand about it, and I'm hoping to share with you today to set some facts straight about that. So I'm excited to be here with Christopher, who I know well, and I'm really looking forward to hearing his presentation as well.
And I neglected to mention that we will have a Q&A section at the end. be sure to put any questions that you have in the chat, but wait until we get to that section so we don't have to scroll back through the chat to try to find your question. Anyway, thank you.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to share my slides and get the ball rolling. Okay, we already introduced ourselves, so let's jump right in. So as I mentioned, IBPA has tons and tons of resources, and one of which is this guide called the IBPA Guide to Publishing Models and Author Pathways. So we have created, there's 8 different opportunities for people to publish books and or for publishers to set up a business publishing books. So I will go through kind of quickly what those are. Author publishers are self-published authors. We call it author publishers because if you're doing it right, you are definitely not doing it all on your own. Hybrid publishers is what we're here to talk about today. University presses and higher education academic publishers, you might think, oh, those sound similar, but university press is specifically for that university's, academic, papers and stuff like that. A higher education academic publisher does textbooks, like for schools and such. Then you have association, society, and nonprofit publishers. And so it's pretty self-explanatory. You have corporate trade publishers. They're like the big 5. They're the ones that, Penguin, Scholastic, and all that. Then you have service providers, and that's going to be another one that we're going to talk in depth about today because there's some confusion between the difference between a hybrid publisher and a service provider. And then we have independent publishers and small presses. And again, that's author publishers and the indie publishers are the ones that IBPA focuses a lot on. And then, of course, hybrid publishers is also mixed in with that. Okay. So let's talk about a general definition of hybrid publishers. So they actually are very similar to an independent publisher. But one of the main differences is that the author will share some portion of the upfront costs in exchange for higher than industry standard royalties. We're going to go into more detail about that, but just wanted to kind of give you a general idea of that. Okay, so you might be thinking, well, if you're an author in our audience, well, who is this even appropriate for me? So here's some reasons why you may want to choose that. So if you have some type of platform and you're looking to grow it, let's say you are someone who wants to, do speaking engagements, or you're someone who's an expert in some type of field, and you already have a social media following, then it might be a good fit for you. If you're willing to take on the responsibility of the costs of marketing, advertising, then also a good fit. But just to be clear, and I'm sure Johanna will back me up on this, in the way that things work nowadays, even if you get your book published by an indie publisher, the big 5 publishers, you're going to be, as an author, expected to do your own marketing. They do have more of a marketing budget, but they definitely, they're not going to be spending $1 million to get the word out about your book. They're going to expect you to do a lot of that. So we also, a helpful thing for authors is when you work with a hybrid publisher, you do get more creative control than if you were to work with, like, let's say, a trade publisher, because see, they're covering all the costs. And so for things like the cover design, the interior, even editing and all that, like, ultimately it's their book. And with the creative control of the hybrid publisher, because you're paying for some of that stuff, there's a little bit more of a dialogue about how you think these things should go. Also, what's helpful is it can complement whatever your existing brand is. Like I said, if you're going to go do a talk about a particular topic, then you can have this book now to sell when you go talk about that topic. And you can also do sales directly through your website. Whereas like with a publisher who's like a trade publisher, they're probably going to be the ones generally selling the book like themselves through whatever channels they have. Okay, so here's why it might not be appropriate if you're this type of author. As I said, you're going to have, it's going to be a good amount of money you might be spending on things like the editorial, the marketing and all that. So if you really don't have the funds for that, a trade publisher will cover, and by the way, that's also an indie publisher, they're going to cover all those costs. But again, because they cover all the costs, they're not going to give you as high a royalty because they're taking all the risk. And you might just want to go through a traditional publishing model because, for example, they probably have been doing it for decades and they have all the know-how about how the industry works and all that. There are certainly some hybrid publishers who absolutely have great knowledge of the industry. So you'd be more than great, you'd be able to work with them on a lot of these topics. Like they'll have a developmental editor. They'll have people on staff that know about the latest trends with book covers and things like that for your genre. But again, you may just want to go through the trade publisher route so that you have those people on staff that you're working with on all that stuff, and you're not paying them to do all that stuff. Okay. Let's go to Johanna, and she will take you through this next part.
Sure. Thanks, Christopher. And I want to give a big shout out to that IPBA publishing map. This is a terrific document. It provides a wonderful service to authors to sort of who might not know much about all the different kinds of publishing. And it's the very first thing when I'm approached by a potential client that I share with them and say, read this first before we talk, because it's just a wonderful, wonderful tool. So thanks, Christopher and IBPA for doing that. Okay, I'm going to talk a bit today about what hybrid publishing is like for the authors and from the author's perspective. Very fortuitously, there's a brand new report out that's specifically on business book ROI that talks a lot about hybrid publishing. And this was Jane Friedman, the very well-known, well-respected industry observer and consultant, did a deep dive on this report in her October 23rd, the Hot Sheet newsletter. If you missed that, go back and check it out, because not only does she, talk about the report, but she, talks to the folks who drew it up about and goes deeper into it. So this is actually produced by Amplify Publishing Group, Gotham Ghostwriters, and Thought Leadership Leverage. It's free to download. You do have to sort of register for it, but Dave Peaty, I think, just put the link in there, and I really recommend everybody that you download that and check it out. Again, a little caveat, what we're going to say about this report is it's specific to business book authors, but some of the stuff is generally applicable to hybrid publishing. And and the respondents are about 300 respondents, and they're a third traditionally published authors, a third hybrid authors, and a third self-publishing. So notable findings: publishing is really expensive. It's a lot more expensive than most authors understand that it takes to get a book edited, designed, printed, and distributed. So more than half the authors, traditional and hybrid, spent more money than they expected in the endeavor. Book sales rarely met those authors' expectations. The median sales for traditionally published books was 4,600. Median sales for hybrid published books was 1,600, and self-published authors even less than that. I think it was about 800. Yet the business book authors who engaged in it were generally happy that they did a book. And that's primarily because the highest goal wasn't to sell books. It was to boost their brand, to increase their speaking revenue, consulting, training, workshops. And they found generally that doing a business book in this space help that. And they really were looking at it as a business growth opportunity than something that's strictly ROI on the book sales. A very interesting point that was made is that authors with hybrid publishers were 2 times more likely that to report they were satisfied or highly satisfied with their publisher. This surprised Jane a lot, because she's been fielding a lot of pretty negative anecdotes from authors who went what they thought was the hybrid way and didn't feel like they got their money's worth. And she talks about this in the newsletter that introduces this report. She speculates that, she and Josh Burnoff, who helped produce the report, say that, maybe it was because in this report, they're requesting the feedback for the survey takers. They were very clear about what kind of publisher we're talking about. Sometimes there's a lot of confusion, and maybe authors think they're signing with a hybrid and they're actually signing with a service provider. So they're very clear getting with their definitions. Also, again, business authors tend to be more happy with the ROI on doing a book, because a lot of the money that they're getting out of doing the book is from other things other than book sales, as I talked about a moment ago. And also hybrid publishers, they speculate, are more incentivized than traditional publishers to make sure their authors are happy, because they're their clients. They need them to be happy because they're going to be a good source of referral and references, and they get back to them faster than traditional publishers might. So again, take a look at what Jane says about all this, because that's a pretty surprising factoid, because often hybrid publishers don't have the best reputation. So if you could go on to the next slide, please, Christopher. Okay, this is based, when I'm here, I'm going to talk about what authors value about the hybrid model. And this is based on the feedback I've gotten from my own clients, and also from the references that various hybrid publishers have steered me to. Authors who go with this model are very clear that they want access to the trade model, the trade market. So whether it's because that hybrid publisher has an in-house sales staff, or whether they partner with someone like Macmillan or one of the Ingram companies, the books get pitched to the sales reps, and then they go out to the market and pitch them to Amazon and Barnes and Noble and the other retail accounts. And for some authors, that's really important. They really want to know that there's at least a chance their book is going to wind up on a bookstore shelf. Flexibility, the authors that I've talked to and worked with really appreciate that hybrid publishers tend to have more flexible contracts and are more flexible about timelines, and as Christopher was saying earlier, the flexibility around, you have a little more control over cover designs or titles, things like that. So they like that. They also generally feel that they get really good client care as a client, and they get prioritized in the relationship. They like a la carte decision making and spending. Often when an author is talking to a hybrid publisher, you get a proposal and it's itemized what you're getting here and how much it's going to cost, And the authors can go back and say, I want A, B, and C, but I don't want D, E, and F. And the hybrid publisher is like, great, okay, they're happy to do that. I have not found that the credible hybrid publishers are pushy or make the authors push the authors into decisions they don't want to do. I found pretty universally that the authors who've gone with hybrid publisher find that they get quality editing, they get quality design, they get quality production. And part of this is because the hybrid publishers are hiring refugees from traditional publishing. These are people who have been trained in, working in traditional publishing houses, whether they're big corporate houses or independent houses. They do really good work. And authors also like the option to exit the relationship at will. Pretty much that's in the contract. If it's not working out, or the author just wants to move on to other things, they can just notify, and often like 30 to 60 days, they're out of that relationship. There's also the option to print POD if the authors don't want to invest in the cost of a short run print run and have to pay that inventory. They can, I think most of the time, choose the hybrid publisher's option to print on demand. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, all this to say is that I encounter a lot of authors who are surprised or have misconceptions about hybrid publishing that they get disabused of in the process and don't always feel great about. And again, publishing is expensive. It's very expensive to produce a quality book. It costs a lot of money. And a lot of authors just aren't familiar with those costs, and they experience a lot of sticker shock over, what's the prevailing rate to have a book copy editor or cover design. Also, a lot of authors think that just because they're spending money on public relations or marketing, that they're going to get results. That is not guaranteed at all, whether you work whether we're talking about traditional publishing, hybrid publishing. So a lot of authors feel like, oh, I've just, wasted a lot of my marketing money. But I think that, traditional publishers would say the same thing, that they can work as hard as they can, but it doesn't always guarantee you're going to get book sales as a result. Big shocker for authors, even though you explain this intellectually to them upfront, they own the inventory. So they have to pay for the print run and all the related fees, including storing the books in the warehouse. So if the author ends up overprinting, they're going to get bills after, until that inventory depletes for storing that inventory. So, and I think part of what happens with this shock around owning the inventory is that the authors typically sign, they sign the contract upfront for deliverables like, editing and production and cover design, things like that. And then they forget that several months later, they're going to have to decide the print run and pay the bill then. They don't kind of put two and two together up front, and they're like, okay, I'm paying $20,000 to have this book produced, but then they may pay another $20,000 6 months down the road. So that's something I just really have to stress with authors, is that they own their own inventory if they don't go for that POD model. Also, something that I know Christopher knows a lot about is that authors don't always understand the distinction between hybrid publishing and a publishing service provider. They are often approached by some publishing service providers who are like, I'll help you get a book, but they don't understand that publishing service provider, perfectly legit, but has no access to the trade market. So really again, another reason to download the IBPA publishing map, because I think it does a really good job sort of explaining what publisher service providers do versus what hybrid publishers do. And then I think another surprise that my clients have had, and also the referrals, is that with the hybrid model, the retailers' sell-in schedules determine pub date for the trade market. So that means that you're not going to be able to jump on, if your book is already done, you're like, I could have this book done in what month is it? In January, the retailer schedule still determines when that book is going to get distributed to the trade. So, you're going to have to be confined to the same structures that traditional publishers are. It's really not a good idea to try and force a book off schedule into the market. You're just going to kill that book's potential. That said, I think the flexibility point I was talking about earlier is often hybrid publishers will say, okay, we can't sell this book into Barnes and Noble until next spring or next summer, but you need these books for a big event that you're doing. We can print the book, we just can't release it to the trade. So if you need the book in a couple of months, we can do that, and then we'll hold it until there's a window in the trade market. That makes sense. Okay, next, please. Okay, finally, I want to talk about the questions that prospective authors should ask of themselves and of their publishers, their hybrid publishers specifically. Get really clear about what your primary goal is and what success would look like for you. If you're just looking to get a return on investment through book sales, there's not a lot of guarantee in there at all, and probably you're going to be pretty disappointed. But if there are other ways in which this is going to advance, like the mission of your organization, or it's a biography of your father, there you have the reasons other than making your money back on book sales, then hybrid is more likely to work for you. But really just get clear on what success would look like, and what kind of budget you're willing to spend. And then when you're talking to prospective hybrids, be bold. Say, don't assume just because they give you a proposal that you have to take everything on that. Be pushy back and say, can I pass in this service? I don't think I'm really going to need it. I'm going to hire my own publicist who's going to handle these things for me. So, just there's a lot of things there that you may not, in the proposals, that you may not need. Make sure that you get that, is this the complete list of fees? So you aren't surprised and you don't have that sticker shock down the road. How much should I expect to pay for each unit of inventory? Again, this is a cost benefit analysis. Don't forget that you're going to have to pay for the inventory, find out how much each unit's going to cost, and make sure you do that kind of calculation upfront. Ask, how many books would I have to sell to break even on this investment? I have found also in this next point is that this is something that there tends to be a lot of confusion around, is what work will the hybrid publisher actually do for the author versus what will they coach the author on doing. Often they'll say produce graphics and other things that are shareable on social media, and the author thinks, oh, just because they're producing them, they're going to run a social media campaign for me. Nope, you're getting coached on how to do that, but unless you specifically pay for a social media campaign, all you're getting is that collateral. You're not getting them actually doing that work for you. So just be very clear when you're talking to your hybrid publisher to get clear on the distinction between coaching and actually performing the task. And then also I would ask for references and comps in specifically in your publishing category. Just as in traditional publishing with hybrid publishers, they specialize, or they're better in some areas and others they have more experience. And you want to make sure that they actually know the market, they know, the profile of the likely purchaser of the book, and so that they can be a strategic partner for you. If you're doing a memoir and you're talking to a hybrid publisher that does business books, that's not going to be a great match. So really check out and ask to talk to authors. Those hybrid publishers should definitely provide references, and you'll get some straight talk from those authors. So that's really worth doing. And if you're a publisher thinking about going into this model, I would just say, just be very clear and transparent with your clients, and make sure that you are clear about what they're getting, what they're not getting, so there aren't bad feelings down the road. I think a real gold standard in doing this is Brooke Warner of She Writes Press. I think they're very clear on their website what they provide. They're very clear about costs. They're very clear that they're not going to do marketing for you, and don't expect that, because that's not their wheelhouse. So anyway, that's my stress to publishing folks who are thinking about the hybrid model, is you really have to be bend over backwards to be extra transparent with your clients if you want this business model to work for you. And Christopher, back to you.
Yeah. And one term I thought maybe you could help define is the trade market. We've used that a few times and people might not know exactly what that is.
Sure. The trade market is the brick and mortar and online bookstores. So those where people, this is Amazon, this is Barnes and Noble, this is bookshop.org, versus the sales that are happening, say you're selling or the publisher is selling in bulk to an organization, or you're selling directly to the customer. Does that work, Christopher?
Yeah. I realize sometimes we use terms and then,
Yes, another piece of advice is, like, for authors, don't be afraid to ask people to define terms that are unfamiliar to you. And for publishers, over explain to your authors and your clients, because this is a very opaque business and we speak in a lot of jargon, and the authors will really appreciate it if you bend over backwards to be clear about the terms that you're using.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So we also have talked about so far that concept of, what is a hybrid publisher, and that there is confusion out there. And IBPA really wanted to make sure, we feel it's like part of what we do is we kind of help define things. We help lay out criteria. So we took time. You mentioned Brooke Warner from She Writes Press. We connected with people who are like legitimate hybrid publishers to help create this. We have know-how. So I'm going to go through detailed explanation of, what is a hybrid publisher versus what is not. And something I want to have you keep in mind as I go through this, I'm going to help us determine hybrid publisher versus service provider. And I want to make it clear, both of those are absolutely legitimate business models. It's just that they have a different type of business model, as compared to the whole concept of like being ethical, which is there are some companies out there that are predatory, that intentionally misuse certain terms, and or they're just trying to get money out of you, telling you that they're going to do certain things, and then people will work with them and find out, oh my gosh, they didn't realize what they were getting into. So something I highly, highly recommend when you're looking for a publisher, especially if you're going to do if you're going to be an author publisher, or if you're going to be going with maybe a hybrid publisher, do your due diligence, ask around. It helps to be a member of something like IBPA, so you can talk to other people in the industry. But Ally, the Alliance of Independent Authors, also has a really great resource. This is the link right here. It's on their website called selfpublishingadvice.org. And they vetted pretty much every one of the self-publishing service providers, and they go through and they say, watch out for them. They have been sued by authors. They're not trustworthy. And then they'll also have the ones where they say, these are great. So I really recommend going on there. And please don't just give people money before you do this research. It breaks my heart. We really do get people coming to us after they've spent thousands of dollars saying, have you heard of this company? And then I'm like, oh no. So ask first. Okay, so here's the first part of the criteria for a legitimate hybrid publisher. They are a publisher, right? So they're going to have a defined mission and vision. A service provider, on the other hand, anyone who gives them money, they will publish their book. So they don't have like a mission. Like they don't publish romance books or just business books, whatever it is. They will publish whatever you give them the money to publish. But a hybrid publisher is a publisher who has a very defined, here's the type of book we do, which gets us to the next point, which is they vet submissions. Like there are books that, people, and I'm sure some of y'all are authors here who have, tried to get a publisher to publish their book and they didn't. And it's just because it wasn't the right fit for them. So if they will just take your money and publish your book, that is a service provider. Okay. Another important distinction is, again, because they're a publisher, they have the ISBN, meaning they are the owner of record. It's the International Standard Book Number. If you're an author publisher, you're going to go through then a service provider, and then you are going to need to buy the ISBNs. Now, some of those companies say, we'll give you a free ISBN. Don't do that. You want to buy your own ISBN because you want on record to be listed as the publisher. If you go through one of these companies, they'll say things like, don't worry, like you're still the owner or whatever. Trust me, you want to be on record when people go to buy the book, like let's say like a bookstore, they don't want to see Kindle Direct Publishing or Amazon come up. And also they then, if let's say you do, like let's say KDP gives you the free ISBN, you cannot use that for other sites. So then therefore now your print book is going to have more than one ISBN. And so it's going to be very confusing for the market if they're looking to buy your book, and like a bookstore is going to go, which edition is this? So buy your own ISBNs. IBPA members get a discount. Okay. A hybrid publisher who's legitimate, and Johanna and I have mentioned this, is that whole concept of distribution, meaning they are going to have some type of network to the trade. They're going to get your book out there. A service provider, on the other hand, they will post your book onto something like Amazon, Barnes and Noble, but they're not going to do anything to sell your book once it's on there. Like your book will live on that site, but if you go through a hybrid publisher, or like any publisher or trade publisher, like they have a team of people that is selling your title, saying this is going to be great for your particular customers. You should, so they're selling copies of your book as a hybrid publisher. We also talked about the higher than standard royalty. So as I mentioned, they are you are paying them to publish your book, right? They're going to cover some of the costs, but not all of them. So on the other hand, if you go through a trade publisher, they're covering all the costs. So of course, they're going to give you less money as a royalty because they're going to say, well, we need to recoup our costs of what you put into this book. And by the way, sometimes they don't. So when you take that risk to put your money out there, if your book sells well, great, you made more money off of it. If it doesn't, again, that's then on you because they're expecting you to get out there and sell your book more. And as Johanna mentioned, it's very important. These hybrid publishers, they have people on their team that publish to industry standards. So another thing that Johanna mentioned was contracts. I know they're complicated and I know there's a lot of language in there, but please read your entire contract. And if you don't understand it, I know it's more money, but please go to a lawyer, have them go through it with you, because the last thing you want is to sell your book, give them the rights to your book in ways you didn't understand. And you're going to be happier knowing that up front and then not going with them than later, whatever, 3 years later, when you go to do something and you're like, oh my gosh, I just didn't understand that. Again, editorial design, production quality. Now this is the next one is to pursue and manage a range of publishing rights. So, it's not just the print book, it's the audio book rights, it's the international rights. So that's something also in your contract you should look into. You are sometimes, like it, depending on your contract, it might say that they have the audiobook rights. And this is not just with hybrid publishers, this is with publishers in general. They may never make an audio book of your book. And then as an author, it's very frustrating because you go, I think we could make some money off this thing. and you can say, I'm even willing to pay for the production costs. They will say, nope, you have it in your contract. We're the one who has the rights to it, and we just don't want to do an audiobook. So that's something that's kind of helpful about maybe a hybrid publisher and a self-published author is you have the depending on the contract with the hybrid publisher, and then especially the self-published author, you can make the decision then about who gets the rights to things like the audiobook or the international rights.
Yeah, Christopher, if I could just
go ahead.
add quickly, add on to your point about audio, what I'm finding with the credible hybrids is that the standard contract will do the print book and the ebook, but you're going to pay extra if you want the audiobook. And often they don't even do that in-house. So they're contracting with somebody outside, you know, a freelancer or another outfit that produces audiobooks. But I mean, if you want an audiobook, you're for sure going to pay extra with a hybrid publisher.
Yeah, and audiobooks can be quite pricey. You're already, you know, producing a print book and an ebook is one thing. An audiobook is an entire like production. You know, they have to hire a narrator, they have to edit it. It's really a lot of work. Sometimes people, you know, that are authors complain because they're like, why is it so expensive? It's because it's like making a movie. Excuse me. It's like making a movie. So you know, if you're doing it right, it will cost money because they need to be, these people are really good at their job and they need to be paid for that. Okay. So we wanted to make sure that we had time for you all to ask questions. But real quick, I have a last slide. I do want to make sure that you all can reach out to us. Like we are happy to answer your questions. So please, this is my contact information, Johanna's contact information. Like we want to help serve you. So I'm going to stop sharing now, but I wanted to make sure to get that in there.
Thank you so much. While we're waiting for people to ask their questions in the chat, I did want to ask one thing, which is I don't think anyone said the words vanity press yet today, right? How does that fit in with this?
You want to take that, Johanna?
Sure, and you can add on to that. So this is a term that was kind of derisively used for self-published authors of either, you know, various manifestations years ago. I think it's sort of gotten eclipsed by all these other terms we're talking about. Vanity publishing is when you're paying somebody to produce your book and you have no hope of it ever getting distributed, and you pretty much have no hope of any sales. So really what you're doing is just kind of maybe you want to produce a book that's for your family reunion. That's a memoir about your parent. And like, but I suppose that's a vanity thing, but your goal is very specific, and it's not about getting your book out into the trade or reaching audiences you don't already know. How does that sound, Christopher?
Yeah, and it's like a derogatory term, you know. What's annoying is, I mean, author publishers and even hybrid publishers, again, they have, for whatever reason, people have this, you know, stigma, that negative stigma. And again, it's a very legitimate business model. It's just a choice, you know. Do you want to have more control of your book? Or as a hybrid publisher, do you want to go with them because you want to, you know, all the reasons we listed, or do you want to set up a hybrid publishing company because of all the reasons we listed? And by the way, trade publishers, you're going to be surprised. A lot of them are now doing their own hybrid publishing contracts in addition to doing trade publishing contracts. So the distinctions between all these different business models is really getting quite muddy. And that's why it's good for you to, you know, talk to the publishers about all these things, because you might not know what you're getting into.
Yeah, I would also add on to that is that the stigma of self-publishing through the eyes of traditional publishers has really gone away. Traditional publishers used to look down at self-published authors and say, "Oh, I'm not interested. You're just a vanity publisher or vanity author." But now I think smart traditional publishers look at authors who have self-published before and say they've already tested the market. And if the market seems to be working, maybe we could take this book up to a higher level. I would say the most successful book I ever signed in my 19 or so years at Barracola was actually first self-published. And Barracola signed that book and then took it up to greater heights. So please think about, as that may be an option. That may be a reason why you want to go with a self-publishing model or a hybrid model, is that you want to prove that there's a market for this, and then you eventually want a traditional publisher to take on the expenses of inventory down the road.
Thank you. Peter Goodman asks, sorry, just went away. Do hybrid publishers have trouble getting reviews in trade magazines, or do some reviewers even refuse to review hybrid publisher books?
So technically, because they're a publisher, they should not. Johanna, do you have more information about that? Because they should be, considered like same as an indie publisher.
Right. I mean, that's something that authors worry about. I think the credible and reputable hybrid publishers make it very clear that there's a tsunami of books out there, and it's hard to get your book reviewed. But I would also point to the fact that there are now services that IBPA actually offers discounts on, where you can pay the traditional reviewers to get your book reviewed. It's not guaranteed it's going to be a good review, and you're allowed to pull it if it's a bad review. But forward, I think what authors want to do is especially work with the outlets that get books reviewed by libraries, because librarians really pay a lot of attention to that. So Christopher, I know that IBPA offers a discount for these paid reviews. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Of course. Yeah, of course. So it's true that indie publishers, and especially the corporate Big Five publishers, have access to getting things like Kirkus Reviews, Publishers Weekly for free. And there's still, especially for self-published authors, unfortunately, the chances of getting a trade review for free are either zero or very slim. But what's helpful is they have these paid versions. And I know it can be confusing, because I know that the idea of paying for a review sometimes might feel like, is this legitimate? So you have things like Publishers Weekly Book Life, Ford Reviews, Clarion Reviews, Kirkus Reviews, the indie one. These are paid, but they are like the same reviewers and the same publication as the ones who are doing the free ones. But the other thing is they get so many books, like thousands and thousands of books. They don't even have time to do all of them. So, they created these. I mean, it's a good moneymaker for them, but they also created them just because they literally don't have the ability to do all the reviews of them. But the good thing is it gives you a path. So I know it's annoying you have to pay for it, but at one point it was zero opportunity for you to get a trade review. And so you could then not get your book into libraries and bookstores, because a lot of them, they want to see that you have a trade review before they think that you're a legitimate book, right? But they'll see the Kirkus review or they'll see the Clarion review and they'll go, okay, we trust them. So yes, IBPA has discounts for a lot of these companies, because again, we know that it sucks that there's this cost to going through one of these other business models. But at least, they exist. Because again, you like the whole trade market, like you just wouldn't ever get your book in a bookstore, years and years ago, if you had self-published it. It can still be quite difficult, but it's definitely a lot higher of a chance, and especially when you get one of these reviews. And you're right, John mentioned about Publishers Weekly, and it is true that they do like vet who's applying, and sometimes people will apply under let's say the indie publisher one, and they will say, no, this is what they consider a self-published book, and they'll say you have to go through Book Life. And so, yes, keep that in mind.
Thank you. We have a couple of questions about costs, and I recognize that this could be a difficult one to respond to, just because there's so many variables involved. But Kristen Franz asks, what is the range of costs you should expect to spend for a hybrid publisher minimum, all the way up to the bells and whistles, including the offset printing and some marketing? And yeah.
Sure, I can take a stab at that. It's, as you imagine, a very, very broad range. You can go from, I think the minimum with no marketing is around $10,000. I think that's pretty much what She Writes Press offers to their clients. The hybrid publishers I've been working with who serve the business book market, the range is generally between $25,000 and $50,000 before inventory, right? And then you can go up to some very, very bespoke options. I know one hybrid publisher that does one book a year and expects the authors to invest $500,000. So there's a big range there, but I would say the middle of the road is probably $15,000 to $25,000. And you want to be really careful with your print runs, because if it doesn't sell through, that's on you, and you own that inventory.
And who doesn't have $500,000 sitting around, right? So, I mean, whatever. That's nuts.
Do you have anything you want to add to that, Christopher?
Yeah, I mean, because I did go the author publisher route, and so it was quite costly, thousands of dollars. And so it's going to be about that, for some of these hybrid publishers, because you're doing a lot of this, you're paying for them a lot of those same services that you're doing when you're an author publisher. I will say the thing that's really nice about like a hybrid publisher is that they have people on staff that are pros, right? So when as an author publisher, you're making decisions because you're wearing the hat of all the different departments. So, the cover design and the interior design, but you may not know what, let's say a romance book versus a sci-fi book should really look like, and what's the most popular new trend. Whereas these hybrid publishers, that's what they do. They focus on that. So that's one of the reasons why going with someone like a hybrid publisher is, in that sense, better than author publisher, is because you're paying them, but for their expertise, versus you're paying a lot of money on your own as an author publisher, and you're the expert. So, and you might not be an expert, and it's okay to acknowledge that.
I think that's an excellent point. A question about contracts. Pamela Malpass asks, comparing a hybrid publisher contract to a trade publisher's contract, is there a grant of rights to a hybrid publisher such that when an author wants to end that relationship, they need to have those rights reverted?
Yes, absolutely. That's actually completely should be expected by anyone signing with a hybrid publishers. You can get your rights back at any time for any reason, usually with between 30 and 60 days notice. That said, suppose you signed a contract with them to provide, to get the book published in the first place, and you've agreed to that, and you want to bail out. You already signed that contract to fulfill those services. I'm talking about once the book is published, right? If you agree to pay $30,000 to deliver a book, you have to pay that bill. You can get your rights back right away, but you still owe the bill. Similarly, if you've decided on a print run and the author is the decider on the print run, you still own that inventory after the rights revert to you. So if you've overprinted and you're still stuck with that, even if you get your rights back. I mean, yes, you could sell it yourself, but you're not going to get off the hook for that inventory. Similarly, if they've signed, the publisher is on your behalf, signed, say, a translation deal for your book, and that contract with that foreign publisher is for 5 years, you're not going to be able to suddenly split out of that contract, because that's a deal that's going to stay in place. But yes, you should definitely expect that there's and also something to notice is that they can bail out too, right? So you also want to know things about, like, what's the financial health of the company? Have they ever bailed on authors before? So it's a mutual agreement that you can walk away at any time.
Yeah, and you should not be surprised that when you do a Google search of any company, it will come up like tons of like other people posting saying, don't work with them, they're terrible, they don't pay their authors. That comes up a lot. So that's why you should just do your own research online, because people talk, right? We help each other. We're a community. We help each other warn each other about bad actors.
Thank you. Can you talk a little bit about, there's sort of this traditional publishing as we knew it years ago. You would submit your book to a publisher, and you might not even know anyone there. It would go into a slush pile. And then you try to, after a whole bunch of rejections, you realize, okay, I need an agent to help me guide me through the process of finding a publisher. Where does the agent fit in with all of this and hybrid publishing? I think also a lot of authors are feeling like it's just as hard these days to find an agent as it is to find a publisher. I know that lots of folks have come to me and said, I'm having trouble finding an agent. You know, can you just publish this for me? And I'm a service provider, so I'm saying no. But so this is going to be very helpful for me to direct, you know, authors to a lot of the resources that you've been providing. But can you talk a little bit about the agent process?
Sure, I can. I mean, often when I start working with an author, I don't immediately go to hybrid or self-publishing. Maybe there's enough value and assets here that this author could find an agent or could find a traditional publisher, especially if like they're not in a position to take on the expenses of hybrid publishing. Um, Generally speaking, agents don't want to have anything to do with hybrid. Agents are all about money up front. And there's no money up front in hybrid. There's only money out the door up front. Agents, I have never seen an agent have anything to do with the hybrid publishing. But like I said, if I think there's a possibility that this author could find an agent, I might choose to kind of test the waters a bit on that. But agents are super picky. It's almost harder to find an agent who's willing to take on your book than it is to find an independent publisher. Christopher, do you have anything to add to that?
That was excellent. Nope, that was great.
Neil, former colleague, provides great info. How often do hybrid publishing deals not involve an author purchase of the print run? Does hybrid imply that the authors always own any books printed?
Well, as I was saying earlier, the many, if not most, of the hybrids that I've worked with offer either the trade route where you have to do a print run to fulfill the laydown, or you could do a POD. You could do strictly a print on demand option, and the inventory that in that case, there's no risk to the author because the book isn't even sold. I mean, the book isn't even printed until it's already been sold. So, but your book isn't going to get out into bookstores that way. You can buy it through Amazon or other places like that, but it's not going to be on any bookstores because nobody's bought it yet. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Yeah, and I wanted to.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So Lee Pierce is here. She's from Ingram Spark, and they do excellent work, and IBPA partners with them a lot. And that's wholesale print on demand, and not just author publishers use them. I mean, our indie publishers and hybrid publishers use them. So it is quite expensive to do a big print run. So print on demand has helped, especially with people, they're just going to buy one copy or whatever. So I do recommend that you check out and get your books in places like that. And if you're going to start a hybrid publishing company, until you get to a certain point, POD is going to still be a good option for you.
Thank you. Let's see, there's a question. Do traditional publishers tend to balk at considering an already published book? I think you addressed this a little bit when you talked about the self-published author was one of the best sellers.
Right. And I'd say that definitely used to be the case. Almost like that traditional publishers would never take a look at a self-published book. It was very déclassé, things like that. It's totally switched. Now it's such an asset to a traditional publisher to know. I mean, assuming the book has done well, that's very encouraging for the authors for the publisher to pick up a book that's already shown market potential, even without the resources of a traditional publisher. So yes, I think that's definitely changed.
Yeah, and also you ever heard of 50 Shades of Grey?
Yeah.
These are The Martian. I mean, these are books that were originally self-published, and they did so well that these companies were like, "Oh, I want a piece of that money," and also then they can get a piece of the film rights and all that stuff too.
Okay. Let's see. Somebody else just came. I think that we're winding down here. Let's see. I don't think this is a question. This is more of an answer in the thread. So I don't think if anybody has any other questions, go ahead and put it in the chat, even if you've already asked, because I thought we had covered them all, but I don't want to have accidentally skipped one. I think, part of, for me, when I encounter authors who are having difficulty navigating this is something that was sort of touched on previously, which is it's not always easy to identify who is a hybrid publisher, right? Or what part of a publishing company is a hybrid, imprint. And maybe you only really get there when you see the contract. And so I love that. I think you provided a link at the beginning, Christopher, about the organization that was sort of vetting presses out there, and that's super, super helpful. But do you have any sort of other advice for someone who's trying to figure out exactly what a press is before they even are submitting it or trying to find the right press?
Sure. I mean, one thing you can do, well, first ask around, right, to people that might have worked with them, but also, ask the company. Like, you can use our link, the hybrid publisher criteria. It's a free link, and you can just ask them, do you fit all of these different criteria? To see if they do. And then you can also use that to look at the way that they sell their company. So you can also see whether or not they do have all those things. Like, you as the author, you can look at the list and go, hey, are you going to cover my distribution? Will I own the ISBN afterward, or whatever, that kind of stuff. So if you want to be like tricky and don't let them, let it on that you're kind of, trying to determine if they're legit or not. It's always helpful for you to inform yourself. So look at things like the hybrid publisher criteria, but never be afraid to ask. I think sometimes, especially when people are given a contract, they get so excited. Oh my gosh, someone's going to print my book. And then they're just willing to sign anything. But you spent years of your life. This book is your baby. Like, do not just give it away because someone's making you feel good that they're telling you it's good. In fact, I would say the people that are pushing the hardest, that are like, just
Are the least credible. Yes.
Yeah, right. Which is crazy. But like, the more they're begging, the more you got to go, wow, they're really pushing hard for this. I don't know. So be leery of those.
Yeah, I'd also say, like, I found that maybe not true universally, but a lot of hybrid publishers don't even go into the PR business because it's so hard to guarantee results with PR, and they'll be honest with you. They're like, we don't do this. It's not our wheelhouse. You can hire your own independent publicist. But there are things that in publishing are just easier to control, like whether or not you have a decent copy editor and decent cover designer. You pay money for that, you're going to get it. You pay money for marketing and PR, it's hard. And anybody who's pushing marketing services like that on you, look hard.
Thank you. One last question. We've got just a few minutes left within the hour. Keith writes, my first book was published with a Creative Commons license. How does that land with a hybrid publisher when considering a new edition or remastered book?
I am not currently up on Creative Commons licenses. I'd be happy to do some research on that, but I can't claim expertise in answering this question, so I'm going to beg off.
Yeah, and you should, more about stuff like that. So yes, email Johanna about that. And also, I'm not sure if you're a member, Keith, but well, anyway, you can email me and I can try to connect you with members if you're a member.
Great. Well, listen, thank you so much. I think I learned more in this hour than I've learned on a lot of Zoom calls recently. So thank you both so much. And what we'll be doing is we'll be getting the video up. So if you missed any of this, feel free to, we will be getting the word out about when we post the Zoom, probably in early next week. I think Monday's a holiday. And we'll include a lot of these resources and links in the description on that video. So it'll be on a YouTube channel for PPN. If you are not on our mailing list, the PPN mailing list, please, it's free. If you want to become a member, it's next to free. It's like $25 a year. We might increase that. So now's the time to join. But thank you again to Christopher at IBPA and Johanna. Thank you so much.
Our pleasure. All right. Hope everybody has a great weekend.
I'm great. Thank you, everyone. Seriously, thank you for coming.